Dr. Eric Pearl ran a chiropractic practice in Los Angeles before discovering reconnective healing. Now recognized and supported by science, reconnective healing facilitates healings for people that are often instantaneous and can last a lifetime. Eric's work has taken him to over 100 countries and has affected millions of people. Eric has been featured on the Dr. Oz Show, the New York Times, CNN, and many others. His internationally best-selling book, The Reconnection, Heal Others, Heal Yourself, is now in over 40 languages. Eric, thank you so much for joining us.
Nathan, I'm really honored at the invitation to participate in such a worthwhile project.
So let's dive right in. What is reconnective healing?
Reconnective healing is a new level of healing that allows us to transcend and let go of complicated techniques and rituals. Instead of just being what we think of as energy healing, instead of just accessing portions of the energy we've had here, it allows us to transcend those focuses, those focal points, those foci, and expand into the entirety of energy. And once we do that, because energy is contained within this illusion of time and space, and time is expanding, then we expand beyond energy into what the researchers say are new aspects of light and information. And therefore, reconnective healing tends to bring about healings that, as we mentioned, tend to be fairly instantaneous because they occur outside of time. And they tend to be lifelong because they're not affected over time.
So how is this different than, say, any other form of energy healing?
Energy healing is usually accomplished via techniques, whether it has to do with moving your hands clockwise or moving your hands counterclockwise, whether it has to do with standing in one position or another. They tend to have rituals or steps. Many of them have protections and procedures. Basically, there's a how-to in most energy healing techniques, which is why they're called energy healing techniques. And what happens with these is that they're often modeled after a pseudo-medical approach. In other words, in a lot of our technique approaches, we look for where we think the problem is. Do we feel a density in the energy field over here? Do we sense that the chakras are spinning clockwise instead of clockwise, or the other way around if you're in New Zealand and Australia? Do we feel that the colors in the auric field need to be adjusted? And so we start looking for where we think, according to the limited conscious human educated mind, the problem may be. In other words, we diagnose, just not necessarily from a medical approach or a laboratory approach, and then we treat what we find. Reconnective healing allows us to evolve into a level that no longer needs to diagnose, no longer has the potential pitfalls of, therefore, misdiagnosing. Doesn't require that we interpret or we locate where we think a problem is or what we think the cause is. Instead, it really much allows us to transcend the training wheels of technique and diagnosis itself, and to instead allow a greater intelligence, what we might speak of as the intelligence of the field, to determine where the problem is. We trust that the intelligence of what science today calls the reconnective healing spectrum, or the reconnective healing intelligence, it knows where to go and what to do without us telling it.
So does somebody need to believe in energy healing, in reconnective healing, for it to work on them? Or have you seen very skeptical people be healed from reconnective healing, even if they don't believe in it?
Reconnective healing is a very funny fascinating and intelligent approach because, and I'm going to say this in the nicest way possible, it doesn't really care whether we believe in it or not. It just is. It's sort of as if I take this glass of water, I set it down on a desk or a table, the table will support the glass of water, and I can pretty much promise you that the glass of water has absolutely no belief in the table. It just is. So when we've been working with a lot of our previous energy healing techniques, belief helped. These approaches were beautiful, and belief was part of what filled in for where energy left off before these new frequencies of light and information from the reconnective healing frequency came in and took over and expanded. So, you know, it's sort of like when I mentioned training wheels earlier. Training wheels are a beautiful invention. They've helped many of us as young children learn to ride the bicycle, and they were a gift. Yet the biggest gift of the training wheels themselves came only when we removed them. And so our approaches in the technique world are wonderful gifts that have helped us. And our belief in these techniques helped us. But the true gift comes when we remove or transcend the techniques themselves. Then we let go of the need to believe. You know, I've heard some wonderful speakers on the topic discuss the fact that faith, as exquisite as it is, hope, as beautiful as it is, and belief, as wonderful as it is, leave just a little bit of question. I hope this is happening. I have faith this is happening. I really, 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 really believe this is happening. What reconnective healing does is it allows us to step instead into a state of knowingness, where the question marks disappear. It allows us to no longer rely on knowledge or what are considered facts and data, because what we know about knowledge, facts, and data is that they're different today than yesterday. There are things we knew yesterday that 25 years ago we wouldn't have understood. And tomorrow we'll find that some of those facts and data we no longer agree with, so they become wrong. Or 25 years into the future, they become wrong. And 50 years into the future, some of them we find we're right all along. In other words, what we consider to be facts and data are really a consensus of opinion at that moment, which varies. But when we step into a state of knowingness, we access the infinite field, what we might refer to as 0-point field, what some people refer to today as the reconnective healing field of information. And then instead of the old concept where we used to think that our thoughts and our beliefs were contained within our brains, we realize that our brains become receivers for this information that really exists in the field itself.
Have you seen people heal from chronic diseases like cancer in using reconnective healing?
You know, one of the interesting things about reconnective healing is that it presents itself to you, both as the recipient and, when you learn to do this, as a facilitator. When reconnective healing first showed up, obviously I had a lot of people coming in to see me to receive this who believed in it, and that was great. We had a lot of people who were sort of forcibly present by a well-meaning friend or a spouse or someone who talked them into it. And they'd say, you know, I don't believe in this and I wouldn't be here if my friend didn't make me come. And I said, you don't need to believe in it. Why don't you say, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, whatever it is, it's a rare opportunity to lie down, close your eyes and relax for 30 minutes in the middle of the day. So take it. And many different things would happen. Things that they didn't expect and things that I didn't expect. I remember in the beginning of doing this work, it was around the time where HIV was really, bursting onto the field. AIDS was everywhere. And a lot of times, since my practice at the time was in West Hollywood, California, I would have people coming in with HIV and a lot of the associated or related diseases, such as, since you speak of cancer, lymphomas. And it was very fascinating that oftentimes the lymphoma, according to the patient, would seem to disappear overnight. They'd call me the next day, they went into their doctor, it was down or it was gone. And usually it would not return. Now, I don't want anyone to think that reconnective healing is a cure for anything. Because the true understanding of the word healing is not about cure. It's really not. Cures are focused on a particular symptom, just like treatment. Reconnective healing is allowing the body to come back to an overall optimal state of wholeness, of wellness, of balance. And in that state, it seems to most appropriately deal with whatever is occurring at that time. So, for example, what we know about reconnective healing from some of the studies that we've done is that it affects the DNA. It restructures our DNA in such a way that the DNA in each of our cells seems to emit higher, more optimal, more harmonic levels of light that communicate with the body. Now, one cell communicates with the next, which communicates with the field. And by returning us to an optimal state of light, it seems to allow for an overall return to balance and health. Again, outside of time. We used to believe that the body healed through the chemical model, which required that what? Something triggered a signal that went to the brain triggered something in the body that communicated to somewhere else where a certain biochemical was produced, then it had to take time to travel throughout the body. But light, being both particle and wave, is everywhere at once. So the light model allows this return to balance fairly instantaneously. And in doing so, many things change, not just what we're focused on changing, but things we have not even thought of. Sometimes I say, if you're lucky, your healing will come in the form you're looking for. And if you're truly fortunate, it will come in a package you haven't even dreamed of.
I've been practicing a form of Qigong. It's a system of Qigong. It's called Wisdom Healing Qigong. And it's, based in 5,000 years of tradition from China. And the master teacher I learned, who's my teacher right now, Master Mingtong Gu, the medicineless hospital in China, where he studied at directly with Dr. Pang, there's a video, I think it was taken down. I don't know if you've seen this. Actually, Greg Braden was there filming it, where they were doing a form of energy healing, a form of Qigong, ancient practice of Qigong. And they have the tumor on the screen, and you can watch it basically disappear within a matter of a minute or two, with the practitioners there doing a form of healing. How is this similar, different, unique to something ancient like Qigong? Is it a similar thing? Is it different? What's your perspective on that?
Approaches such as Qigong and many other of the techniques that we know of access different parts of the energy field that we spoke of sooner, or that we spoke about earlier, I should say. So there's the Qigong portions, and there are multiple Qigongs, and the Reiki portions, and there are multiple Reikis, and there's this portion and that portion. The distinction is that reconnective healing is here to let us take down these focal points or borders and to expand beyond. So once we access the spectrum of energy lighted information, it includes the gifts of all of our known energy healing techniques without us having to learn the technique itself. It allows us, in other words, to let go of doing the healing, and instead allows us to become the healing. It allows us to let go of focusing on a specific outcome and to open up to allow for the optimal outcome, whether or not we know what that outcome might be.
Now,
So,
is that happening? Is that happening from both the practitioner as well as the receiver or client or patient or whoever it is?
Well, good question. Part of the consciousness requires, or is, I should say, is beneficial for both the practitioner and the client to understand. See, when Jillian and I teach Reconnective Healing, a large part of the teaching is actually the philosophy of stepping into this expanded awareness, this expanded consciousness. So we suggest that if you are a client, if you're there receiving Reconnective Healing as a client, or if you're facilitating Reconnective Healing as a practitioner, you are also receiving. In our approaches up until now, they've been fairly linear. So the practitioner would send the healing energy to the client. In Reconnective Healing, it is about receiving. It's about becoming the observer and simultaneously the observed, the witness and simultaneously the witnessed, or the seer and the seen. And as you receive as a practitioner, you change, the field changes, and the field within which the client exists changes. But you see, part of this understanding as we step into it is recognizing that everyone is touching, although it may appear that no one is touching, and nothing is touching, and everything is touching. So if we look through an electron microscope at something seemingly dense, like a copper plate, we'd find that most of it is not material. It's an energy informational field. Even if we get down to the protons, the neutrons, the electrons, most of the space between them is an informational field. And you could say, well, I can see that the electron is circling the nucleus, but I see the protons and the neutrons. The protons and the neutrons are clumped together. But if we really focus in tightly, we see there's a lot of space there. If you take a few protons and blow them up to the size of oranges, just an orange, just about this size, 2 oranges, you can't see them both on this screen because the distance between these 2 oranges is equivalent to 2 to 2.5 football fields. Now, if we can grasp that that nucleus is this tight, and the distance between these 2 orange-sized protons are 2 to 2.5 football fields, then we begin to realize that the electron, proportionately in one atom, is way out there beyond what we perceive here as the stars. So nothing is touching, and yet everything is touching. When you're holding the hand of someone close to you, you're not physically touching, and yet we are touching. Right now, Nathan, you and I are connected. As I allow myself to receive, to feel, to just conceive of understanding, you're affected in this field, and yet we're sharing this, what seems to be real time. In reality, everyone watching this interaction is sharing this field in their actual time, even though this interview may have taken place a day ago, a week ago, or 5 years ago. Because time is an illusion, it's non-linear. Does that help?
Yeah, that makes it's very clear how you've explained it. And for those tuning in who might not know, Can you explain more about the energy field that connects atoms in all life together? I love the analogy of blowing them up to oranges, and they're actually as far apart as a couple football fields, but compressed together. I mean, that's how much we know that there's so much space between, but we also know that it's not just empty space, right?
It's not empty space. It's a field of information. So right now, your molecules, my molecules, and whoever we are talking to right now, through whether they're watching it on the internet, whether they're watching it live, whether they're watching it from a download of a long time ago, our molecules are being changed because our energy information fields are evolving. And this is not a static moment in time. It continues to expand. So, for example, in Reconnective Healing, at our training programs, one of the things we teach you is how to facilitate healings from a distance. And although Jillian and I spend most of our time, maybe 30 some weeks a year, traveling, we try to create some time where we do distance healings for people in different parts of the world who can't get to us. Partly, it's almost, you could say it's selfish, not in the negative way, but it's of self because it allows for our own growth through our own love and our own sharing. And as we access these fields, even here, there's a presence that is shared through the energy field with someone else. And when our time of facilitating a healing finishes, the healing is ongoing. The healing actually begins before we begin, before the client lies down. It continues afterwards and it perpetuates, and yet it's not limited to just the facilitator and just the client. First of all, it's a three-way interaction, one of the best three ways you'll ever have. What happens is it's your energies, your essence, combining and interacting with the essence of the other person, with the essence of the universe, all at one at that moment. And then there's an ongoing expansion. But you see, you can't affect any one proton, neutron, or electron without affecting everyone else and everything else in the planet. So we're having a conversation here, and maybe a relative of yours is at the beauty salon having no concept of what's going on. But that person pops into your mind. They are now in this healing field. What if they don't pop into your mind? They're still in this field because every change we make in ourselves expands out throughout the universe and throughout time that affects everyone. So in essence, when we allow ourselves to just grow in awareness or to feel or to experience or to think about something, we change the universe. When we have a question, when we have an answer, when we have an exploration, it's really part of the universal design, because every proton within us expands, which means every proton within the universe expands. It is selfish not to grow. It is selfish not to explore, because the universe is counting on us. We are here for a reason. Not your standard medical teaching, but we're here for a reason.
So, shifting a little bit, I want to ask about emotions and how they play a role in healing, and are they a part of, healing the subconscious, emotional healing? Is that a part of reconnective healing at all? Or what's your take and experience with emotional health in regard to healing?
Well, it depends on how you're approaching the concept of emotion. In other words, as a healing facilitator, I often find that my heightened feelings and emotions often tend to intensify the experience, not only for myself, but for the other person. And yet it doesn't seem to matter whether the emotion has to do with happiness or sadness, or whether it happens to be heartfelt or just excitement at something interesting, or maybe just the enjoyment of the sound of a thunder and lightning storm. So intensity of emotion often seems to help. What I don't do is subscribe a lot to the approach of saying, no wonder this person got throat cancer. They clearly were holding back in their communications. No wonder this person had this disease. I always told them if they don't let go of these intense things, then this will happen. If they don't stop arguing with people, then they're going to cause heart attacks or whatever the reason is. Because although I understand the thought process in thinking about that relationship, I really find that it tends to feel quite a bit like blaming the person who is already going through a health situation. It's just blaming the person who is already going through a health challenge. Sometimes we'll say things and we mean well. We'll say, you really just need to choose to get well. Well, it sounds good, but it's really highly disempowering, because you're right on some levels, but a lot of times we don't know how to choose to get well. Reconnective healing doesn't focus on a symptom because it focuses on the whole picture, not just a part of the iceberg, the 10% above the water, but every part. So sometimes people who are a little bit afraid of healing will say, well, I don't know whether I want to facilitate a healing for someone. What if they have that healing? Won't that be cheating them out of their lessons? And I understand that thought, but the answer really in reconnective healing is just clearly a single syllable, no. What happens is when we interact with the reconnective healing frequencies, we gain the fullness of what's to be gained from the experience. When the healing manifests for ourselves, we've been given permission, granted permission by the only intelligence that matters. Call it God, call it love, call it the infinite field, call it whatever you will. We're the only ones who care what name we call it. It doesn't. And in that receiving, everything that was supposed to be brought to us from that experience is, including our lessons, and they may not even be learned on a conscious level. So there's a lot that gets taken into consideration. There's a lot that gets taken into consideration. Thank God it's not limited to what we can consciously conceive of ourselves.
So that kind of dovetails perfectly into my next question, which was really focused on, you have somebody, let's say, who has cancer, they go through reconnective healing, the cancer miraculously goes away, but then that person doesn't change their diet or lifestyle or habits, and cancer comes back. Is that a common thing? Or what I'm hearing you say is that through reconnective healing, you're actually focusing on getting to the deeper cause, but at the same time, I'm trying to reconcile, how does that directly affect somebody then going home and changing their life habits, their diet, their thinking, their emotions, all those things that can contribute to a cancer diagnosis?
Oftentimes, once people receive reconnective healing, they do change after the fact. And sometimes they don't change those things, and sometimes they do. And let's be real about diet too. You've heard more than on one occasion, 2 nutritionists, 3 opinions. So, we are saying, is it this diet? Is it that diet? Is it just greens? Is it, paleo? Is it this, that, or the other? And everyone's got an opinion and a half on it. But people do change often following their approach to things. Jillian is a vegetarian, raw foods. Because of that, I have a lot of vegetarian meals and a lot of juicing that I do, but when I want a steak, I want a steak. So, and I find yet the healings still work absolutely beautifully. There's an inner knowingness that we get more in touch with when we interact with reconnective healing. If they don't change, will this recur? In reconnective healing, it tends not to, and I say tends because nothing comes with an absolute promise or a guarantee. Usually once the healing takes place, you don't need to come back again and again and again. You don't need to clear the auric field. You don't need touch-ups. You don't need this. You don't need that. Common sense, however, is a nice thing to have in life. You are in a more optimal state for healing and health and longevity. But do you want to struggle against it? So let's take it to an extreme. Buses pollute the air. I probably wouldn't want to spend all day, every day walking behind buses and inhaling the exhaust, even if I had reconnective healing. I probably wouldn't want to walk underneath a piano being hoisted over my head in case the wire breaks, even if I've had reconnective healing. So therefore, making this more simple, yes, it's nice to modify our diet and our exercise and our health habits. It's nice to explore yoga if that's where you're led. It's nice to explore meditation. It's a gorgeous thing. I'll tell you, research from the University of Arizona, and actually just some research I did mildly in Petaluma this past weekend, showed that when you access the reconnective healing frequencies, you enter into a state of what the scientists call quiescence. A clarity, a focal point, an awareness, a centeredness equivalent to 40 to 60,000 hours of meditation. I should say people who have in their history 40 to 60,000 hours of meditation for them to get near this state. And even if you've never meditated, and I started meditating in the past 2 years, but I never did before. Even if you've never meditated, as you learn reconnective healing, you learn how to immediately access this state. So you get amazing gifts and benefits that are some of them accessible in other ways? Sure. 40 to 60,000 hours later in meditation, you might have this. Personally, I'm not quite that patient, so I'm glad it's here now. So you're led to make changes. Once in a while, does someone who received a healing through reconnective healing, for one reason or another, choose to give it up? And I use that word choice, whether it's conscious or not. Yes, I've seen it a few times, and I understand even the reasons why. I understand even the reasons why for some of those people. But generally, the healings are lifelong.
So two questions. How long does it take somebody to learn this? And the second part of that question is, can I learn it and apply it to myself? Or does somebody else have to apply it to me?
Reconnective healing can be done for yourself, can be done for others. That's why I came up with a rather innovative name for the book. It's called The Reconnection, Heal Others, Heal Yourself. And we went back and forth. Should it be heal yourself, heal others, heal yourself? And finally, we just tossed a coin. How long does it take to learn? How long does it take us to be willing sometimes to let go of certain thoughts that we've gotten comfortable with, but that might have served a purpose but no longer be serving us fully? Sometimes it requires a letting go of things. You know, a lot of us view children as empty vessels presented to us for us to fill with everything that we know. When maybe it's time we start to look at children as empty vessels brought here to teach us how to become empty vessels once again, how to let go of what we think we know and what we've learned and what may have served a function for us, and instead say, did I gain from that experience enough to let it go? And see what is coming in new. This is part of learning reconnective healing. I'll tell you this. For example, I had always, since it started, taught this in person. And since I've met Jillian and I have been teaching from the beginning in person. And yet, just within the past 2 years or so, we created an online program. Now, level 1 to learn reconnective healing is available online on our website, on thereconnection.com. I wondered about it just for a moment. But just like with the book, when I was writing the book, the editor from Hay House kept calling me while she was working on it. She said, I can't work on this book. Every time I pick it up, my hands start to vibrate, my body starts to vibrate. I said, don't worry, you'll get used to it. I don't know whether she ever did, but she did edit the book. And through the internet, when you access the online program, what we call the portal, because it's a doorway, it's an opening into this, where Jillian and I teach you philosophy, the science, the principles, or show you exercises, how to begin to work with this, you feel it, you change, you are transformed. And now, when we teach the live course, which is called the Catalyst, what we call level 2, the students coming in are so far progressed beyond what we've been used to. We've been used to, I think, going into the old energy healing bookstores and the metaphysical bookstores and reading every book and taking all the information and dumping it into a blender and adding water and hitting blend. And that's what we got. Some things blend, some things don't. You might have a beautiful perfume or fragrant oil. You might have 2 or 3 favorites, but you know enough not to mix them in the same bottle. They might not smell as good. And reconnective healing has a purity where we access the frequencies, what's called the bandwidth, this spectrum that brings us into the energy, light, and information, and allows an intelligence to take over. It releases the borders. You know, for example, many of our approaches, many of our religions, many of our perspectives on life or philosophy are like windows. One of us looks out of one window, one another, one another. One window might show a church, one a mosque, one a synagogue, one a temple or a shrine, one a beach or a palm tree. And we often argue over whose window is right. Because if someone else's is right, our initial response, coming from a little bit of fear, doubt, insecurity, self-worthiness questions, might say that might make ours wrong, which might make our parents and our grandparents wrong. But when we allow ourselves to step back and pause for a moment, we might look out of a window of someone that we trust, and it's not our window, someone we feel comfortable with, maybe a potential life partner, and say, okay, your window shows this, and mine shows that. Does it mean one has to be wrong? Or is there a bigger picture that incorporates both? Can it incorporate a church and a mosque and a synagogue and a palm tree and a beach? And if it can, why have I not been seeing the whole picture? Because we've been inside. Really, what we need to do is understand that the window frame becomes a perspective limitation. And our view becomes limited by the frame. It's further limited by the wall that supports the frame. But maybe once we're willing to step out beyond the window, join hands with other people, go up on the roof, have a party for God's sakes, look around, see 360 degrees in all directions. We begin to open up into a limitless expansion that always existed, but we didn't allow ourselves to enter because we were behind the wall, behind the window frame, behind the glass. Now, what if someone comes up to join us on that ever-expansive party and says, hey, I want to add something. I've got this really nifty window frame. I'm going to add my window frame to the party. Do we get a bigger view? No. The view reduces itself to only what we can see through that frame. So the gift is to say, I've gotten some tremendous views through my window frames. Would I like to let them go and see a greater picture? I can always walk back inside the house and look out through the window again if I choose. But I'd like to make the choice from choice.
How did you discover reconnective healing? Normally it's a question I might ask you in the beginning, but I felt it appropriate to save it till the end.
Really? Okay. You know, it's interesting because the truth is interesting. What's interesting about the truth includes different responses that people of different mindsets will have to the truth and what they're holding on to. For example, a lot of the things that we respect today at one time were considered quackery. And if the story of their discovery didn't fit the medical or the scientific model, then that was used as evidence, supposedly, of their quackery. Now, we know better now, but, that was the approach. A lot of times, for example, if someone has a health problem, if they went to anyone other than a classical medical doctor, then that other person would be accused of delaying that patient's necessary medical care. And yet, in many situations, if you went to someone and your classical medical care was pharmaceutical, and meanwhile, the problem continued to expand, then maybe that medical doctor was delaying necessary healing or health care. In other words, there is an approach I believe in. And that approach is give a body a chance to heal itself first. Help it and support it. And then if not, then great, there are pharmaceuticals. Great, there is surgery. In the cancer world, for existence, a lot of the approach is symptomatic. Someone comes in with a tumor, and what happens? The tumor is treated. Sounds good. When the tumor is gone, they say the cancer is gone. But the tumor is not the cancer. The tumor is a symptom. The cancer, according to whichever school you're listening to, has been developing 5 years, 7 years, 20 years in advance. And when enough cells clumped together and enough cells were enveloped in something, there came a tumor. And so you irradiate the tumor and you surgically remove the tumor and you don't see any more cells from that cancer, and you say the cancer is gone, but not really that easily, because you're not considered clear of the cancer for at least 5 years of being cancer-free. Why? Because the imbalance that allowed the cancer to form in the first place is not being addressed in that approach. Reconnective healing approaches the imbalance to rebalance, and therefore allows the body the optimal opportunity to then deal with the symptoms or the tumor itself. Now, this does not mean that a medical approach is inappropriate at that time. It's not necessarily, although I would rather interact with reconnective healing before chemo and radiation and give the body its healthiest position to deal with that. But that's a personal choice, and I believe that should be left up to everyone for that situation. So when we approach healthcare, I think it requires a bigger picture. I believe that every healthcare discipline plays a vitally important role in health. The biggest danger comes about when one healthcare discipline appoints itself as the expert over all the others. Now, that wasn't really your question, but I want you to know that my answer to your question is one of those truths that when someone hears, they can go, oh, well, that sounds a little bit out there. Well, it is the truth, and it sounded a bit out there to me, too, because I had been practicing as a chiropractor in Los Angeles for 12 years, when one night a few strange things happened. Let's just say a lamp next to my bed turned itself on and woke me up in the middle of the night. And the first thing I saw when my eyes opened was that my bedroom door was open, but it was closed when I went to sleep, and no one else was in my house. So I got up, grabbed the biggest knife I could find, my Doberman pinscher, and an empty can of pepper spray from an old self-defense course that I figured made me look intimidating. And I walked through the house looking, and I couldn't find anyone. I decided it was my imagination. I went back to sleep. But that Monday when I went in to see my patients and my employees started asking me questions. What happened to you? You look different. You sound different. What did you do? I said, nothing went on. I went in to see my first patient. I adjusted my patient. I held my hands near them afterwards for a moment because I was feeling interesting things in my hands. And as I held my hands near them, I saw their eyes start to rapidly dart back and forth, and the muscles pulling at their eyebrows and their lips and their fingers moving up and down. And when they opened their eyes after the adjustment, they told me that they were seeing colors they'd never seen, smelling flowers they'd never smelled, and they felt someone standing in the room with us. And I thought, well, all right, this person is having an interesting experience. When it happened to the second, third, and all the way through the seventh patient that day, I knew something real was going on. As I moved my hands and felt sensations, I pulled and I stretched, and unlike energy, the further away I got, the sensations did not get weaker. The registers, the involuntary responses did not get weaker, they got stronger. There became more. And soon people started saying, what are you doing? And I said, I'm not doing anything, and don't tell anybody. And of course, the more I said that, the more everyone started talking. And soon researchers came and television media came, and they wanted to understand what it was. And people started asking me to teach this. And I said, you have got to be crazy. I'm standing there, I'm waving my hands in the air, looking like an idiot. You go outside, wave your hands in the air, let me know what your neighbors say about you. But the healings started happening. My patients started reporting seeing colors when they had been colorblind all of their life, or being able to get out of wheelchairs and walk, regaining the use of arms and legs, hearing, organs functioning, going to the hospital for surgeries, for tumor removal, and being sent home because the tumor just wasn't there any longer. And we began to recognize that something was happening. So as the researchers came out, they started measuring what they could find in the field, and they were saying, there's a frequency that's happening, frequencies we haven't seen before, aspects of light and information expanding beyond energy we haven't seen before. And when people really wanted me to teach this, I played with it, and I said, well, I'll let you feel it, and I'll show you how I do it. But I really didn't think that anything was happening, because I thought, this is some kind of a very unexpected gift. I'd never studied energy healing or anything like this. I didn't expect it to happen. But I found that people were fairly instantaneously able to access this. And the only thing that got in their way, two things. The conscious window frames they brought to that party in the roof, and more insidiously, the unconscious ones, the ones that we're not aware of. So the healing started happening bigger and bigger and bigger, and I thought, I need to find out about healing. So I started reading every book on it, and healers from around the world were contacting me, and I was contacting them, and everyone was offering suggestions. Move your hands this way, move your hands that way, put flowers in the room, don't cross over this line, pull up imaginary protectors, and shake your hands into salt water and spray yourself with alcohol. And all these things I did, and the healings went down and down and down and down and down, until I started realizing putting flowers in the room to protect ourselves from ghosts looks pretty, but it's a protection, and everything we do to protect ourselves brings us to a consciousness of fear. Every object that they would say to use this crystal for that and that for the other, and this pendulum for this, and this magic thing to slice through the etheric fields, was really telling us that we weren't enough. Every object we buy, every protection we employ is selling us something. And it's not that it's selling us that particular object or the technique. What it's selling us is on the fear that we are less than enough. It's selling us on a fear that we are not worthy of our own essence. What we found from reconnective healing and from the studies from DNA and everything else is that once you access this field of light, as we explained earlier, the light resonates instantaneously throughout the body. And it resonates in the field and it resonates with the other person. Everyone vibrates at this level of light. And vibrating at that level of light shows us that our fears and our health challenges were just an absence of light. They never actually existed, because when the light comes in, we find that the darkness all along had merely been an illusion. It's vibrating at a level of truth. Going through life less than healthy is not necessarily our highest truth. And so, like rattling a rusted bell and the rust falls away, vibrating at a level of truth, our untruths fall away. Vibrating at a level of light, we find that the darkness had always been an illusion, because if darkness existed, we could sweep it up, put it into a paper bag, and stick it out with the trash. It's just been an absence. And when we recognize absence as absence, we become not only our own light, but the light for others. And we no longer rely on objects or protections, because light has nothing to protect itself from. And we have nothing we need to protect ourselves from.
Beautiful. So well said. Yeah, it brings up some incredible stories I'll save for another time that basically validates exactly what you're saying. So thank you for sharing that. And as we kind of come to a close here, final question. People tuning in are of all different backgrounds, ages, races, all over the world. People who have cancer, people who want to prevent cancer, as well as professionals in every field, from naturopaths, holistic practitioners, energy healers, medical doctors, and so forth. What final words would you share with everyone tuning in about their potential next steps for stepping deeper into this world of reconnective healing, energy healing, bringing this work into their lives?
First of all, healing as it is now here through this spectrum, through the reconnective healing intelligence, is so expansive that anyone and everyone can learn how to do this. You can learn to facilitate true healing for yourself and for others. No specific degree or background in healthcare or not in healthcare gives anyone an advantage or a leg up on anyone else. Contrary to the bumper stickers, doctors don't do it better, and these people don't do it better, and those people don't do it better. The reality is this: if you're looking to find that one special healer on the planet, on a mountaintop in Tibet, or a church deep in Brazil, or anywhere else, save your money. You need not travel. You need not go and find that one special person. That person is the person you see in the mirror every night before you go to sleep and every morning when you wake up. It's up to us to learn to recognize our worthiness. There's nothing we need to do. You don't have to eat the perfect diet. You don't have to have the perfect spiritual belief. You don't have to do anything. We are simply worthy. By having been born, you are simply worthy by having been born. And I believe that Reconnective Healing and people such as you, Nathan, and these projects are here to illuminate that for us.
Beautiful. I love that message. It's something that resonates deeply with me, especially a lot of times people go down a healing path and they think, what's wrong with me? They're told, there's something wrong with you. You have to fix this in you. And something about that has always seemed off to me. And I resonate so much more with what you just said, which is we all come here whole and complete as totally wholesome human beings, totally worthy, totally full with, source, with life, with all the energy, the healing capacity of the universe. We tend to pack that down with our beliefs and our traumas and so forth, but it doesn't mean anything's wrong with us, right? We're all underneath all that. We are whole, complete, fulfilled human beings. And so I love that that's your message. And I just want to say how much I appreciate you for the work you do, for being here and sharing this short time together, but you shared so much. I hope that many people tuning in take away something inspiring from your message and from this work. And I do want to encourage everyone tuning in to learn about the courses, the events, how you can learn this work, buy Eric's book. Go to the website, thereconnection.com. We'll put a link below this video as well. That's www.thereconnection.com. And again, I just appreciate you so much, Dr. Eric, for sharing this work and for stepping into fulfilling this role. It must have taken a lot of courage to accept what this gift that you've been given, but I'm so grateful that you are empowering others to learn it for themselves as well and not keeping it for yourself. I think that's very noble of you. So thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. And you're doing the same thing. What's interesting when we say it must have taken a lot of courage is that we think that people who are brave aren't afraid of anything. And yet we realize, if we think about it, the people who are brave do the things that they're afraid to do.
Right.
And yet there's another level. A lot of times we hear the concept of being God-fearing taught in our religions. And that translation is actually a mistranslation. The original word, norah, for that on its base level meant fear. On its highest level means awe. When we step into the unknown, we tend to have a choice. Awe and fear can seem or feel similar. If we're in fear, we retreat back. If we are allowing ourselves to be in awe and wonder, we explore forward. Now is the time for humanity to step forward and explore in awe.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.